Greetings, my name is Blaze and welcome to my channel. If you've not been here before, I talk about thought, theory, and my interpretation when it comes to things that I'm interested in. For today's video, I actually have a video request response for you. Today's video request comes from Elijah Zorn, and it says here, let's see, "Hey Blaze, could you possibly do a video on the various disciplines of magic around the world? Your favorite as far as lore and method of practice go." So, here's the thing. When it comes to magic as it's practiced around the world, the term magic comes into scrutiny as far as what is actually magic. And I think not only can we define it ourselves to try to understand where I'm coming from, but I think how these cultures describe it and define it will exclude or include certain practices. So the way that I kind of describe magic is I consider magic to be a way of working with the world around you. And I think that it has to do with knowing how the world works and how you can interact with it. So that means, by my definition, magic would include science, art, and different type of things that most folks might not consider magic. I don't think magic is just about spiritual and spellcasting and focusing your thoughts. Yes, that's included in many things that I consider magic, but so is art, so is music, so is dance, so is martial arts. Any sort of creative self-expression, to me, is an expression of magic itself. I believe working with the herbs and the elements to create things and craft stuff through metallurgy, through herbalism, through medications, I believe all of that is also magic. So I consider all of that magic. So, yeah, my term of what magic is much broader than what most people consider. So maybe let's try to narrow that down to what the average person might consider more of a mystical type of nature that's more ethereal and spiritual than it is part of the physical realm. Even though, again, I think that the world that we live in today is very, very, very much magic. So my personal preference when it comes to magic in its various forms and disciplines have to do with two different paths that mean something to me personally because it has to do with my heritage and my ancestry. So one of those is the Nordic Scandinavian traditions. Some people call this heathenry or heathenism, but basically we're talking about any of the Scandinavian paths that are being reconstructed. Now I'm saying reconstructed because what was done is gone. What we had is no longer. We have stories and we have remnants. We have some of the sagas and eddas we can read to get insight to possibilities. We have archaeology and we have rune stones to go off of, but honestly we don't know how they practiced in many cases. We have assumptions. Now we do have cultural traditions, which again, that's why I'm like, hey, cultural traditions. My grandmother was literally born and raised in Iceland. My mother and many of my aunts and uncles were born and raised in Reykjavik. So having some of those cultural traditions to apply and adapt to modern practices and reconstruction stuff, that's why I feel a connection there. However, there's different ways of practicing that. But still, that general, because you're talking about various places around the world, that general spot, Scandinavia, specifically with me, it's Iceland, Sweden, Norway, and Germanic traditions, that type of an areas where my ancestors are from. So that's the stuff that I like a lot. Then there's also another part of my heritage, which is from Ireland. And that's, I guess today a lot of it would be called like neo-Druidry for the most part, or Druidism, depending on which practice you're going with. I prefer the Druidry practices versus Druidism practices. I've gotten into the difference in a separate video, but at its core, Druidism, it was coined as a term by, Isaac Bonowitz to specify a religious practice, versus Druidry, which I believe was coined by Ross Nichols, which indicates a spiritual practice, and I prefer the spiritual approach. Again, we don't know what the ancient Druids did, and there was Druids in more places than just Ireland. They're talking about all of the quote-unquote Celtic world, which there's debate whether or not ancient Irish people were Celtic or if Celtic people invaded. There's debate over that. But France and Britain And all the way over throughout the East, there was a huge area that were considered Celtic tribes because Celtic was a language set, and there was a large language set. So specifically, I believe it was, now I'm going to misquote it, I believe it's the Gaelic tongue is what ancient Irish language is called. I thought it was Gaelic. So, some quick web foo, sometimes referred to as Gaelic, but apparently it's spelled like this. Put that over the top of the screen, and apparently that's how Old Irish was referred to. But anyway, some of the Neo-Druid practices today, I think, are pretty cool too. So I like some of those traditions, specifically the Irish cultural traditions, but I also like some of the Welsh stuff because a lot of our sources come from the Welsh traditions as well. So even though I don't have any heritage there, any of the Neo-Druidry stuff, I like a lot of that stuff as well. Then the last one that I have a big interest in has to do with the fact that I like martial arts. And I don't really care what your opinion is of martial arts because there's a lot of martial arts trolls online. But yeah, some of the Chinese martial arts I like a lot, specifically that have to do with Taoist practice. Now, I don't know a lot about the actual Taoist religion as it was practiced in China in the ancient times or today, because that one, as far as I know, did survive. However, I do know a fair amount about the Western interpretation of Taoism, which is more of a philosophical Taoism versus a religion. Since I don't know how the actual practice was done religiously speaking, I know a little bit. Some of the things that they used to do, like there are these papers where they write out sort of like a spell on the paper, and it was kind of like an order that they're sending out to a deity requesting some help. And they had different ways of cultivating chi with internal alchemy, sometimes referred to the Nadon arts. And we have interpretations of how some of that is done in the Western world, but let's face it, we put a Western cultural influence on our practices with Taoism over here in the West. And those practices are the only ones I've had exposure to, and I like them because it syncs with some of the martial arts practices that I've done, like Dai Chi Chuan. So I like that type of stuff too. That is probably the three big ones that I like the most. Now, there's other ones that I've looked into, and there's other ones that I kind of like and I've drawn from. I like, even though I don't know a lot about it, some of the Native American tribal spiritual traditions are phenomenal. The little bit that I've had the opportunity to explore into a little bit. Some of the stuff like witchcraft itself, some of it was okay. I like some of the witchcraft traditions, and supposedly they trace back to the Jade Tablet and the Egyptian traditions, which I don't know a lot about the Egyptian traditions either, but the Egyptian traditions and witchcraft, not too much. Like I said, some of the stuff with witchcraft was okay, and like I said, it would probably be down to the heathenry, Druidry, and Western Taoist practices. Those would be the three big ones for me that I like a lot. Those are the ones I favor. So what I ended up doing is I had 3 questions from Elijah Zorn, and I'm going to break that into 3 separate videos because it looks like the request was for 3 different videos. So these are going to be 3 separate small videos where I'm answering questions, and I'm just going to splice the beginning piece and the end together. So that was the first of 3 questions. Hope you enjoyed it. Please check out the next one. I'll have that posted shortly. Thanks for watching.